I never wanted to be noticed. In the world of the Famiglia Castellano, being invisible was survival. You kept your head down, you followed orders, you never asked questions, you delivered the packages, you collected the debts, you stood in the back during the meetings at the social club on Mulberry Street, and you waited. You waited for your turn to speak, your turn to sit closer to the table, your turn to be seen. I was Marco Vitelli, 28 years old, a soldier. Nothing more, nothing less. I had been with the family for 6 years. My Uncle Sal brought me in when I was 22, fresh out of a dead-end job at a construction site in Brooklyn, hungry for something more than concrete dust and a paycheck that barely covered rent. Sal was a capo, respected, connected. He told me the Famiglia would take care of me if I proved myself loyal. So I did. I ran errands, I kept my mouth shut. I learned the codes, the gestures, the silence that mattered more than words. But 6 years later, I was still standing in the shadows. The higher-ups knew my name, sure. Don Castellano had shaken my hand once at a wedding, his grip cold and firm, his eyes passing over me like I was furniture. I was useful, reliable, forgettable, and I told myself that was fine. Until the night Sal called me into the back room of Rizzo's, the old Italian restaurant where we held our quiet meetings. It was late, past midnight. The dining room was empty, except for 2 enforcers playing cards near the kitchen door. Sal was sitting at a corner table, a glass of whiskey in front of him, his face shadowed by the dim yellow light of a single hanging bulb. He looked at me for a long time before he spoke. "You ever been to the Don's estate, Marco?" I shook my head. "No, Sal. Never had a reason to." "Well, now you do." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I opened it. An address in upstate New York. Coordinates, really. Middle of nowhere. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Sal leaned back in his chair, his eyes tired. "Special delivery. Personal. The Don wants it handled quietly. No one else. Just you." I frowned. "Why me?" "Because you're nobody, Marco." He said it without malice. Just fact. "You don't have a reputation. You don't have enemies. You're clean. The Don needs someone who won't draw attention." I nodded slowly. In our world, being nobody was sometimes the best thing you could be. "What am I delivering?" Sal reached under the table and pulled out a small wooden box about the size of a cigar case wrapped in black cloth. He set it in front of me. "Don't open it. Don't ask what's inside. You drive up there tomorrow night, you hand it to the caretaker at the gate, and you leave, understand?" "Understood." He poured himself another whiskey. "And Marco, don't talk to anyone while you're there. Don't look around. Don't linger. The Don's estate is not a place for curiosity." I picked up the box. It was heavier than it looked. "Got it, Sal." He waved me off, and I left. The next evening, I drove north in my old Chevy, the box sitting on the passenger seat like a bomb. The city lights faded behind me, replaced by dark highways and empty fields. The GPS led me off the main road, down a narrow gravel path that twisted through thick woods. No streetlights, no signs, just trees and shadows. After 20 minutes, I saw the gate. It was massive, wrought iron at least 15 feet tall with intricate designs that looked like they belonged in a European castle. Beyond it, I could see a long driveway lined with stone lanterns, leading up to a mansion that sat on a hill like a sleeping giant. The house was old, Gothic, with tall windows and dark stone walls that seemed to swallow the moonlight. I stopped the car in front of the gate and waited. A man appeared from a small guardhouse to the left. He was older, maybe 60, with a lined face and cold eyes. He wore a long black coat and carried himself like someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. I rolled down my window. "Delivery for the Don," I said, holding up the box. The man didn't smile. He looked at me, then at the box, then back at me. "Name?" "Marco Vitelli." He pulled out a small notebook, flipped through it, and nodded. "Wait here." He disappeared back into the guardhouse. I sat in the silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The woods around me were too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of my engine and the faint rustle of leaves. The gate began to open. The man returned, gesturing for me to follow him. "Drive up to the main entrance, leave the car. Someone will meet you." I drove through the gate slowly, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The driveway was longer than it looked, winding up the hill past rows of statues, angels, lions, hooded figures, all carved from white marble and stained by time. The mansion loomed closer with every turn, its windows dark except for a few flickering lights on the upper floors. I parked near the front steps and got out, the box tucked under my arm. The front door was already open. A woman stood in the doorway. Not old, not young, maybe in her 50s. She wore a black dress that went down to her ankles, and her hair was pulled back tight. Her face was stern, unreadable. "You are Marco Vitelli," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. Follow me." She turned and walked into the house without waiting for a response. I followed. The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, chandeliers dripping with crystal. Paintings of stern-faced men in old-fashioned suits lined the walls, their eyes following me as I walked. The air smelled like old books and candle wax. The woman led me down a long hallway, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. We passed closed doors, heavy curtains, and more statues. Everything felt frozen in time, like the house had been sealed away from the world decades ago. She stopped in front of a set of double doors at the end of the hall. "Wait here," she said, and disappeared through the doors, leaving me alone. I stood there, the box growing heavier in my hands. I could hear faint voices from inside, muffled and low. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was tense. There was a pause. Then a man's voice, deep and commanding. "The Don." The doors opened again. The woman gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside. The room was a study, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. Behind the desk sat Don Enzo Castellano. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair slicked back, a sharp suit, and eyes that could cut through steel. He didn't look up when I entered. Standing beside him was a younger man, maybe in his 40s, lean and cold, the underboss. I had seen him once before, at a distance. His name was Luca Moretti. He stared at me like I was an insect. "Put the box on the desk," the Don said, his voice calm but absolute. I did as I was told, setting it down gently. The Don opened the box without hesitation. Inside was a small leather journal, old and worn. He flipped through a few pages, his expression unreadable, then closed it and looked at me for the first time. "You did not look inside." "No, Don." "Good." He slid the journal into a drawer and locked it. Then he leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You are Salvatore's nephew." "Yes, Don." "He says you are loyal." "I am, Don. Loyalty is rare." He paused. "And expensive." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. The Don glanced at Moretti, then back at me. "You will stay tonight. There is a matter that requires discretion. You will leave in the morning." My heart sank. "Don, I was told to—" "You were told to follow orders," Moretti cut in, his voice sharp. "The Don has given you new orders. You stay." I nodded. "Of course." The Don waved his hand, dismissing me. The woman appeared at my side as if summoned by thought, and she led me out of the study. As we walked back down the hallway, I felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the silence, in the way the shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. The woman stopped in front of a guest room on the second floor. "You will sleep here. Do not leave this room unless called. Do not wander. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." She opened the door and stepped aside. I walked in. The room was simple but elegant. A four-poster bed, a nightstand, a single window overlooking the gardens. The woman closed the door behind me without another word. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Why did the Don want me to stay? What matter required discretion? And why did I feel like I had just walked into a trap? I went to the window and looked out. The gardens below were dark, lit only by the faint glow of the moon. I could see shapes moving in the distance. Hedges, statues, maybe shadows. And then I saw her, a woman, standing at the edge of the garden, looking up at the house. She was young, dressed in white, her long, dark hair blowing in the wind. She stood perfectly still like a ghost. And then she turned her head, and I swear she looked directly at me. I stepped back from the window, my pulse quickening. When I looked again, she was gone. I pulled the curtain closed and sat back down on the bed, my hands shaking. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light, my imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had just been seen. And in this house, being seen was the most dangerous thing you could be. I didn't sleep. How could I? The house was too quiet, too heavy with secrets. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows, felt like a warning. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of the woman in white standing in the garden. Who was she? Why was she out there alone in the middle of the night? And why had she looked at me like she knew I was there? Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for the knock, the command, the summons, but nothing came. After a long minute, the footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. I exhaled slowly and closed my eyes. but sleep never came. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I got up and splashed cold water on my face from the basin on the nightstand. I looked at myself in the small mirror on the wall, dark circles under my eyes, stubble on my jaw. I looked like a man who didn't belong here, because I didn't. I was about to try the door to see if I was allowed to leave the room when there was a soft knock. "Come in," I said, my voice rough. The door opened, and the same stern woman from last night stepped inside. She carried a tray with coffee, bread, and cheese. "You will eat," she said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "Then you will be summoned." "Summoned where?" She looked at me like I had just asked the stupidest question in the world. "Where the Don wishes." She left without another word. I ate quickly, the bread dry in my mouth. The coffee was strong, bitter, and did nothing to calm my nerves. I paced the room, checking my watch every few minutes. 7 in the morning, 8, 9. Finally, at 10, the woman returned. "Follow me." We walked down a different hallway this time, deeper into the house. The walls here were covered in dark red wallpaper, and the paintings were different. Women in old-fashioned dresses, children with blank expressions, landscapes of mountains and rivers that looked like they belonged in another century. We stopped in front of a set of tall wooden doors. The woman knocked twice, waited, then pushed them open. "Enter," she said. I stepped inside. The room was a dining hall, massive and cold. A long table stretched down the center, big enough to seat 30 people. Candelabras lined the table, but only a few candles were lit, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The windows were tall and narrow, letting in slivers of grey morning light. And at the far end of the table, sitting in 4 chairs like thrones, were the Don's daughters. I stopped in my tracks. I had heard rumors, of course. Everyone in the family had. The Don had daughters, 4 of them, hidden away in the estate. No one ever saw them, no one ever spoke to them. They were ghosts, legends, locked behind gates and walls like prisoners or treasures. I had assumed they were children or maybe teenagers. I was wrong. They were women, young, beautiful, and dangerous in a way I couldn't put into words. The eldest sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. She had long black hair pulled back into a sleek bun, sharp cheekbones, and dark eyes that studied me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. She wore a black dress, elegant and severe, and a thin gold chain around her neck. She looked like she was in her late 20s, maybe 27. To her right sat the second sister. She was younger, maybe 25, with wild curls that fell around her shoulders and a red dress that clung to her like fire. Her lips were painted dark, and she leaned back in her chair with one leg crossed over the other, watching me with a smirk that was half amusement, half challenge. The third sister sat quietly, her eyes lowered, her hands resting on the table. She wore a simple grey dress, and her hair was braided and draped over one shoulder. She looked like she was around 24, delicate and pale, like a porcelain doll. But when she glanced up at me just for a second, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't delicate at all. It was sharp, calculating. And at the end, the youngest. She couldn't have been older than 23. She wore a white dress, just like the woman I had seen in the garden last night. Her hair was long and loose, falling in dark waves around her face. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes, wide, dark, unblinking, were locked on me like I was the only thing in the room. No one spoke. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do, what to say. The woman who had led me here had already disappeared, closing the doors behind her. I was alone with them. Finally, the eldest spoke. "You are Marco Vitelli." Her voice was smooth, controlled, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent. "Yes," I managed. "Our father has told us about you." She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "He says you are loyal, discreet, invisible." I didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult. "I do my job," I said carefully. The second sister laughed, a low, throaty sound. "Invisible. How boring." "Valentina," the eldest said sharply, not looking at her. "Behave." Valentina rolled her eyes but said nothing. The eldest turned her attention back to me. "My name is Isabella. I am the eldest daughter of Don Enzo Castellano. This is Valentina, Giulia, and Sofia." She gestured to each of her sisters in turn. I nodded, unsure of what else to do. "You are probably wondering why you are here," Isabella continued. "The Don said there was a matter that required discretion," I said. "Yes, the matter is us." I blinked. "I don't understand." Isabella stood, smoothing her dress, as she walked around the table toward me. She moved like a queen, every step deliberate and graceful. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "We are not allowed to leave this estate, Marco. We have not left these grounds since we were children. Our father keeps us here for our protection, or so he says." I stayed quiet, my instincts screaming at me not to respond. "We have been raised in isolation," Isabella went on. "We have tutors, books, music, art. We have everything we could need, everything except freedom," she paused, "and company." Valentina leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "We've never met a man outside the family who wasn't a guard or a servant, and they don't count. They're too afraid to even look at us." "But you're not a guard," Julia said softly, her voice like a whisper. "And you're not a servant." Sophia said nothing, but her eyes never left me. I felt my throat tighten. "What do you want from me?" Isabella smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing you cannot give freely, Marco. We simply wish to know you, to speak with you, to understand what it is like outside these walls." Our father has given his permission," Isabella interrupted. "You are to stay for 3 days. During that time you will dine with us, walk with us, and answer our questions. Consider it part of your service to the family." I swallowed hard. This was insane. Dangerous. The Don's daughters? What kind of game was this? But I couldn't refuse. Not without disrespecting the Don. Not without putting myself and Sal in danger. "Of course," I said. "Whatever the Don wishes." Isabella's smile widened. "Good. Then sit. Have breakfast with us." She gestured to an empty chair near the middle of the table. I walked over slowly, feeling all 4 pairs of eyes on me. I sat down, my hands gripping the edge of the table. A servant appeared from a side door, silent and quick, and placed a plate in front of me. Eggs, sausage, fresh bread. I wasn't hungry, but I picked up a fork and started eating. "Tell us, Marco," Valentina said, leaning forward. "What do you do for the family?" "I follow orders," I said. "That's all." "That's enough." She grinned. "I like him." "Valentina," Isabella said again, her tone a warning. Julia spoke next, her voice soft but clear. "Do you have a family, Marco? A wife? Children?" "No, just an uncle." "No one else?" Sophia asked, speaking for the first time. Her voice was light, almost childlike, but there was something underneath it that made my skin prickle. "No one else," I said. She smiled, a small secret smile, and looked down at her plate. We ate in silence for a while. I could feel the weight of their stares, the questions they weren't asking, the tension in the air. This wasn't a simple breakfast. This was an interrogation. When the meal was over, Isabella stood. "We will walk in the gardens this afternoon. You will join us." "Of course. Until then, you may return to your room." I stood and nodded, turning to leave. But as I reached the door, Sophia's voice stopped me. "Marco." I turned. She was standing now, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes wide and earnest. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked. I hesitated. "I don't know." She smiled again, that same secret smile. "I do." And then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I left the dining hall and returned to my room, my mind spinning. What the hell had I just walked into? The Don's daughters were not what I expected. They were not innocent girls locked away for their safety. They were sharp, aware, and something else. Something I couldn't name. And they were all looking at me like I was the answer to a question I didn't understand. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, and realized the truth. I wasn't here to deliver a package. I was the package. And the game had already begun. The afternoon came too quickly. I spent the hours between breakfast and the garden walk, trying to make sense of what was happening. The Don's daughters. 4 of them. Hidden away like secrets. And now they wanted me to walk with them, talk with them, be near them. It felt like a trap, but I couldn't see the mechanism. What did they want? What did the Don want? And why me? I was nobody, a soldier, expendable. There were 100 men in the family more important, more connected, more worthy of being in the presence of Don Castellano's daughters. But they had chosen me, or rather, the Don had chosen me, because I was invisible, because I wouldn't be missed. The thought settled in my gut like a stone. At 2 in the afternoon, the stern woman knocked on my door again. "It is time," she said. I followed her down the stairs, through the main hall and out a set of glass doors that led to the gardens. The sunlight was harsh after the dimness of the house, and I squinted as my eyes adjusted. The garden stretched out before me, vast and meticulously kept, hedges trimmed into geometric shapes, stone pathways lined with statues, fountains that no longer flowed. Everything was beautiful and dead at the same time. The four sisters were already waiting. They stood together near a marble fountain at the center of the garden, their dresses bright against the grey stone. Isabella in black, Valentina in red, Giulia in grey, and Sophia in white. They looked like figures from a painting, frozen in time. As I approached, Isabella turned and smiled. "Marco, right on time." "I try to be," I said. Valentina laughed, punctual and polite. "Are all soldiers this boring?" "Valentina," Isabella said, her voice sharp. "Enough." Valentina shrugged and turned away, but I could see the smirk on her face. Isabella gestured to the path ahead. "Come, we will walk." We started down one of the stone pathways, the four sisters surrounding me like I was a prisoner being escorted. Isabella walked on my right, Valentina on my left, Giulia a few steps behind, and Sophia trailing at the back, her eyes never leaving me. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were our footsteps on the stone and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. The gardens were too quiet, too perfect. It felt wrong. Finally, Isabella broke the silence. "Tell us about the city, Marco. What is it like?" I glanced at her. "The city, New York, the streets, the people. We have only seen it in books and on screens. Our father does not allow us to leave. It's loud," I said. "Crowded, dirty, people everywhere, always moving, always in a hurry." "It sounds wonderful," Sophia said from behind me, her voice soft and wistful. I looked back at her. She was smiling, but there was sadness in her eyes. "It's not as wonderful as you think," I said. "But it's free," Valentina said, her tone sharp. "That makes it wonderful." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I stayed quiet. We walked past rows of rose bushes, their blooms dark red and almost black in the fading light. Giulia finally spoke, her voice quiet and measured. "Do you enjoy your work, Marco? Serving the family?" I hesitated. It was a dangerous question. "I do what's required." "That's not an answer," she said. I stopped walking and turned to face her. She was watching me carefully, her grey eyes sharp and knowing. She didn't look away. "I'm loyal," I said. "That's all that matters." "Loyalty," Valentina scoffed. "The great virtue of men who have nothing else to offer." "Valentina," Isabella snapped. "You will not speak to him like that." "Why not? He's a soldier. He's used to being ordered around." "And you're used to being locked in a cage," I said before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air like a slap. Valentina stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. Then she laughed, a loud, genuine laugh that echoed through the garden. "Oh, I like you," she said, grinning. "You have teeth." Isabella's expression was cold. "That was inappropriate, Marco." "I apologize," I said, lowering my head. "I spoke out of turn." "No," Valentina said, stepping closer. "You spoke the truth. We are in a cage, and we've been here so long we've forgotten what freedom looks like." She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers light against my sleeve. I felt a jolt run through me, and I pulled back instinctively. She raised an eyebrow. "Afraid of me, Marco?" "No," I lied. "You should be." Isabella moved between us, her voice firm. "That's enough, both of you." Valentina stepped back, still smiling, but there was something dangerous in her eyes now, something hungry. We continued walking, the tension thick between us. Sophia drifted closer, falling into step beside me. "Do you have someone waiting for you in the city?" she asked. "No," I said. "No one at all?" "No one." She looked up at me, her dark eyes wide and searching. "That must be lonely." "I'm used to it. I know what that feels like," she said softly. "Being alone." I glanced at her. She was young, too young to sound so sad. "You have your sisters?" "Yes," she said, "but it's not the same." We reached the edge of the gardens, where a low stone wall separated the manicured grounds from the wild forest beyond. Isabella stopped and turned to face me. "Our father has told us very little about you, Marco. Only that you are trustworthy. But we wish to know more." "There's not much to know," I said. "Everyone has a story," Giulia said, stepping forward. "Even soldiers." I looked at the four of them, standing in a half-circle around me, their eyes locked on mine. It was like being interrogated, but softer, more intimate, more dangerous. "What do you want to know?" I asked. "Why did you join the family?" Isabella asked. "I needed work. My uncle brought me in." "That's all? No grand ambition? No desire for power?" "Power is for capos and bosses. I'm just trying to survive." Valentina tilted her head. "And do you? Survive?" "So far." She smiled. "So far." Sophia moved closer, her hand brushing against mine. "Do you think we're strange, Marco?" I looked down at her. "I think you're trapped." Her eyes widened. "Yes, that's exactly what we are." Sophia, Isabella said, her voice tight. Step back. But Sophia didn't move. She looked up at me, her face so close I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Will you help us? She whispered. Help you with what? I asked, my voice low. Escape. The word hung between us like a knife. Before I could respond, Isabella grabbed Sophia's arm and pulled her back. That's enough, Isabella said, her voice hard. Sophia, you will go back to the house. Now. But. Now. Sophia's face crumpled, but she turned and walked away, her white dress trailing behind her like a ghost. I watched her go, my heart pounding. Isabella turned to me, her expression cold and controlled. My sister speaks out of turn. Do not listen to her. I wasn't going to. Good. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because if you so much as think about helping any of us leave this place, you will not survive the night. Do you understand me, Marco? I met her gaze. There was no warmth there, no softness, just cold, calculating power. I understand, I said. She nodded and turned away. We are finished here. Return to your room. She walked back toward the house, Julia following silently behind her. Valentina lingered for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. You're in over your head, soldier, she said quietly, but I think you already know that. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the garden. I stood there for a long time, staring at the stone wall, at the dark forest beyond. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand, something that would swallow me whole if I took one wrong step. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint but clear. Marco. I turned. Sophia was standing at the edge of the garden, half hidden by a rose bush. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Meet me tonight, she whispered. Midnight. The library on the second floor. Please. Before I could respond, she disappeared into the shadows. I stood there, my mind racing. This was insane. This was suicide. If the Don found out, if Isabella found out, I would be dead before morning. But as I walked back to the house, as I climbed the stairs to my room, as I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the clock on the wall, I knew the truth. I was going to go, because I had already been seen, and there was no going back now. The clock ticked toward midnight, and I waited. I left my room at 11:45. The house was silent. Not the comfortable silence of sleep, but the oppressive silence of a place holding its breath. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet sounded like a gunshot. Every shadow in the corners seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. I told myself I was making a mistake. That meeting Sophia alone in the middle of the night was the fastest way to end up dead. The Don didn't strike me as a forgiving man, and Isabella had made it clear what would happen if I stepped out of line. But I kept walking. The library was on the second floor in the west wing. I had passed it earlier when the stern woman had led me through the house. The doors had been closed then, but I remembered the dark wood, the brass handles, the faint smell of old paper seeping through the cracks. I reached the doors at 2 minutes to midnight. My hand hovered over the handle. Last chance to turn back. Last chance to return to my room, pretend I had never heard Sophia's whisper, and maybe, just maybe, survive the next 2 days. I opened the door. The library was vast. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. A stone fireplace dominated one end of the room, cold and dark. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, and the only light came from a single candle burning on a small table near the center of the room. Sophia was standing beside the table, her white dress almost glowing in the candlelight. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, a small, relieved smile. You came, she said softly. I shouldn't have, I replied, closing the door behind me. But you did. I walked toward her slowly, keeping my distance. What do you want, Sophia? She looked down at her hands clasped in front of her. I wanted to talk to you, alone, without Isabella watching, without Valentina teasing, without Julia analyzing every word. Why? Because you're real, she said, her voice breaking slightly. You're the first real person I've spoken to in years. I frowned. The guards, the servants, they're afraid of us, she interrupted. They're afraid of what my father would do if they spoke to us like we were human. But you're different. You look at me like I'm a person, not a prisoner. You are a prisoner, I said quietly. She nodded, her eyes glistening. Yes, we all are. I moved closer, stopping a few feet away from her. Why are you here, Sophia? Why are any of you locked away like this? My father says it's for our protection. that the world outside is dangerous, that men would use us, hurt us, take us away from him. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. But I think he's the one who's afraid that if we leave he'll lose control, and control is all he has left. I didn't know what to say to that. The Don was many things, but I had never thought of him as afraid. How long have you been here? I asked. Since I was 10. Isabella was 14, Valentina was 12, Julia was 11. She wiped her eyes. Our mother died when I was born. After that my father became obsessed with keeping us safe. He brought us here and we never left. 13 years, I said, doing the math. You've been here for 13 years. Yes? And you've never tried to leave? She shook her head. Where would we go? We have no money of our own, no identification, no knowledge of the outside world beyond what we read in books. And even if we did escape, my father would find us. He always finds what he's looking for. I thought about the reach of the Famiglia Castellano, the connections, the resources, the men who would do anything, the Don asked without question. She was right. They would never make it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I think you can help us, she said, stepping closer. Not to escape, not yet, but to understand. To see us as more than the Don's daughters. To see us as people. I do see you as people, I said. Then why won't you look at me? She whispered. I met her gaze. Her eyes were wide, desperate, and something else. Something I didn't want to name. Sophia, you don't know me, I said carefully. I'm not a good man. I've done things. I don't care, she said, her voice fierce. I don't care what you've done. I don't care who you are in the world outside. Here, in this house, you're the only person who's treated me like I matter. You do matter, I said. Then prove it. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. Stay with me. Just for tonight. Talk to me. Tell me about the world. Help me feel alive again. I should have pulled away. I should have told her this was dangerous, that we were both playing with fire. But I didn't. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently. All right, I said. What do you want to know? Her face lit up, and for a moment she looked like a child on Christmas morning. She pulled me over to a pair of chairs near the fireplace, and we sat down, the candle flickering between us. Tell me about the city, she said. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the streets of New York, the noise and the chaos, the smell of hot dogs and exhaust fumes, the way the lights never went out, even in the middle of the night. I told her about the subway, the crowds, the street performers, the little Italian bakery on Mulberry Street where I bought coffee every morning. She listened with rapt attention, her eyes wide, her hands clasped in her lap. Sometimes she would interrupt with questions. What does the subway sound like? How tall are the buildings? Do people really move that fast? And I would answer as best I could. Time slipped away. Minutes became an hour, then 2. At some point, she leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, and I realized how close we were sitting. Close enough that I could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. What about you? She asked suddenly. What do you want, Marco? What do you dream about? I hesitated. No one had ever asked me that before. I don't dream much, I said. Everyone dreams. I looked away, staring at the cold fireplace. I used to dream about being more than a soldier, about making a name for myself, about being someone the Don would notice, someone he would trust. And now I just want to survive. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. I looked at her, and she was staring at me with such intensity that it made my chest tighten. Why? I asked. Because surviving isn't living, she said. It's just existing, and you deserve more than that. Before I could respond, the door to the library opened. We both froze. Valentina stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. She was wearing a dark red robe, her curls wild around her face. She looked at Sophia, then at me, and a slow smile spread across her face. Well, she said, her voice low and amused. What do we have here? Sophia stood quickly, her face pale. Valentina, Relax, little sister, Valentina said, walking toward us. I'm not going to tell Isabella. She'd lock you in your room for a week. What do you want? I asked, standing as well. Valentina stopped a few feet away, her eyes scanning me up and down. I wanted to see if Sophia's little midnight rendezvous was real. And it is. How delicious. Valentina, please, Sophia said, her voice pleading. Don't ruin this. Ruin it? Valentina laughed. Darling, I'm here to make it more interesting. She walked past Sophia and stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from her body. She looked up at me, her eyes dark and challenging. Tell me, Marco, she said softly. Do you find my sister beautiful? I didn't answer. Come now, she pressed. It's a simple question. Do you find her beautiful? Yes, I said. Sophia's eyes widened. Valentina smiled. And what about me? Do you find me beautiful? Valentina, stop, Sophia said, her voice breaking. But Valentina ignored her. She reached up and touched my face, her fingers trailing along my jaw. You're playing a dangerous game, soldier. Do you know that? I'm not playing anything, I said, my voice hard. Liar. She leaned in closer, her lips inches from mine. We're all playing. The only question is who wins. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her hand away. This isn't a game. Everything is a game in this house, she said, her smile fading, and you've already lost. She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Sophia. Enjoy your soldier while you can, little sister, she said, because tomorrow I'm going to take him from you. She left, closing the door behind her. Sophia sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. I'm so sorry, Marco, I'm so sorry. I knelt down in front of her, pulling her hands away. It's not your fault. It is, she said, tears streaming down her face. I brought you into this. I asked you to meet me. And now Valentina knows, and she won't do anything, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Sophia looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. You don't know her, Marco. When Valentina wants something, she doesn't stop until she gets it. And now she wants you. I stood, running a hand through my hair. This is insane. I know. She stood as well, wiping her eyes. But it's too late now. You're caught in this, whether you want to be or not. I looked at her, at the fear and sadness in her face, and I felt something twist in my chest. She was right. I was caught, and I had no idea how to get out. Go back to your room, I said quietly, before anyone else finds you here. She nodded, but before she left, she turned back and looked at me one last time. Thank you, she whispered, for tonight, for seeing me. And then she was gone. I stood alone in the library, staring at the dying candle, and I knew the truth. I wasn't just caught in this game. I was the prize, and the Don's daughters were about to go to war over me. The next morning, everything changed. I woke to the sound of shouting. Not the controlled, measured voices I had heard in this house, but raw, angry screaming. Women's voices. The sisters. I jumped out of bed and went to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. The shouting was coming from somewhere downstairs, muffled but intense. I could make out a few words, mine, not yours, he chose me, but the rest was lost in the chaos. Then suddenly, silence. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. A man's footsteps. I stepped back from the door just as it opened. The underboss, Luca Moretti, stood in the doorway, his cold eyes locked on mine. The Don wants to see you, he said. Now. My blood ran cold. What's this about? You'll find out. He turned and walked away, and I had no choice but to follow. We went downstairs, through the main hall, past the dining room where I had first met the sisters, and into a part of the house I had never seen before. The walls here were darker, the air colder. We stopped in front of a heavy wooden door with iron reinforcements. Moretti knocked twice. Enter, came the Don's voice. Moretti pushed the door open and gestured for me to go inside. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me with a heavy thud. The room was a study, smaller and more personal than the one I had been in before. Dark wood, leather chairs, a single desk with papers spread across it. And sitting behind the desk, hands folded, expression unreadable, was Don Enzo Castellano. Standing to his left were his 4 daughters. Isabella looked furious, her jaw tight, her hands clenched into fists. Valentina was smirking, her arms crossed over her chest. Julia stood quietly, her face pale and unreadable. And Sophia looked like she had been crying, her eyes red and swollen, her hands trembling. The Don looked at me for a long time before he spoke. Marco Vitelli, he said, his voice calm and measured. Do you know why you are here? I swallowed hard. No, Don. My daughters have presented me with a problem, he said, and I have decided that you will solve it. My heart was pounding. I don't understand. The Don leaned back in his chair. You have been in my home for 2 days. In that time, my daughters have developed an interest in you. A significant interest. I said nothing. Valentina claims you belong to her, the Don continued. Sophia insists you are hers. Even Julia has expressed curiosity. And Isabella, he glanced at his eldest daughter. Isabella believes none of them should have you at all. Isabella's eyes were like ice. He is a distraction, father. A soldier with no prospects, no future. He should be sent away immediately. And yet, the Don said, You are the one who argued most passionately against him leaving. Isabella's face flushed, but she said nothing. The Don turned his attention back to me. My daughters have been isolated their entire lives. They have had no experience with men outside of guards and servants who are too afraid to look them in the eye. You are different, you are not afraid, and that has made you dangerous. I never meant— Silence, the Don said, his voice sharp. I am speaking. I shut my mouth. I have raised my daughters to be strong, intelligent, and loyal to this family, the Don continued, but I have also protected them, perhaps too much. They do not understand the world. They do not understand men. And now, because of you, they are at each other's throats. Valentina laughed. We've always been at each other's throats, father. Marco just made it more interesting. Valentina, the Don said coldly, you will speak when I tell you to speak. She fell silent, but the smirk never left her face. The Don stood and walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of me. He was shorter than I expected, but his presence filled the room. I could feel the weight of his power, his authority, pressing down on me like a physical force. I could kill you, he said quietly. Right now, one word, and Moretti would put a bullet in your head. No one would ask questions. No one would mourn you. I believed him. But, he continued, that would solve nothing. My daughters would still be fighting, still be divided, and I cannot have division in my house. He walked to the window, looking out at the gardens. So, I have decided to give you a choice, Marco Vitelli, a choice that will determine not only your fate but the fate of my daughters. I felt my throat tighten. What choice? He turned back to face me. You will choose one of them. The room went silent. Choose? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, the Don said. You will choose one of my daughters to be your wife. My legs nearly gave out. Don, If you refuse, he interrupted, you will die. Tonight, and my daughters will never speak your name again. Valentina's eyes gleamed. Sophia looked like she might faint. Julia watched me carefully, her expression unreadable. And Isabella looked like she wanted to strangle me with her bare hands. This is insane, I said. This is survival, the Don corrected. You have disrupted the balance of my household. Now you will restore it. By choosing one, the others will accept their place. The fighting will end, and my daughters will learn a valuable lesson about desire and consequence. And if I choose, I asked, then you will marry her. You will become part of this family. You will live here, in this house, under my protection and my command. You will no longer be a soldier. You will be my son-in-law. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. This wasn't a choice, it was a death sentence dressed up as an opportunity. When do I have to decide? I asked. Now. My blood turned to ice. Now? Yes. You will choose now, in front of me, in front of them. I looked at the four sisters. Isabella, proud and furious. Valentina, hungry and defiant. Julia, quiet and calculating. Sophia, desperate and fragile. How could I choose? How could I condemn one of them to a life with me, a man they barely knew? How could I reject the others and live with the consequences? Don, I said carefully, I don't know them. I've only been here 2 days. How can I— Life does not wait for certainty, Marco, the Don said. You make a choice and you live with it. That is what it means to be a man. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. Think. Isabella didn't want me. She had made that clear. Choosing her would be a punishment for both of us. Valentina wanted me, but for the wrong reasons. She saw me as a game, a prize, something to win. There was no future there, only chaos. Julia was a mystery. I didn't know what she wanted, what she thought. Choosing her would be a gamble. And Sophia had been the first to reach out to me, the first to see me as something more than a soldier. But she was also the youngest, the most vulnerable. Could I do that to her? Could I trap her in a marriage she might regret? Marco, the Don said, decide. I opened my eyes and looked at each of them one last time, and then I made my choice. Sophia, I said. The room exploded. Valentina screamed, a sound of pure rage. Isabella's face went white. Julia simply looked down at her hands. And Sophia collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face, sobbing. The Don nodded slowly. It is done. No, Valentina shouted, stepping forward. No, this is wrong. He's mine. I saw him first. I wanted him first. You wanted a toy, Isabella said coldly, not a husband. And you wanted nothing, Valentina shot back. You wanted him gone. You have no right to judge me. Enough, the Don said, his voice cutting through the argument like a blade. Marco has made his choice. Sofia will be his wife. The rest of you will accept this, or you will leave this house and never return. Valentina stared at her father, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. For a moment I thought she might attack him, but then she turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Julia walked over to Sofia and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Congratulations, little sister," she said quietly. Then she left as well. Isabella stood frozen, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Hatred, regret, relief. Finally she spoke. "You have no idea what you've just done, Marco Vitelli. You have no idea what kind of life you've chosen." She turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the Don and Sofia. The Don walked back to his desk and sat down. "The wedding will be in 3 days. You will remain here until then. Moretti will make the arrangements." 3 days, I said, my voice hollow. "Yes, my daughters have waited long enough for their lives to begin. Sofia will not wait any longer." He looked at Sofia, who was still crying quietly in her chair. "Go to your room, Sofia. Prepare yourself. You are to be married." She stood shakily and walked toward the door. But before she left, she turned back and looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but there was something else there too. Gratitude, fear, hope. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone. The Don stood and walked to the door. "Moretti will escort you back to your room. You will not leave it without permission. You will not speak to my other daughters. You will do nothing but wait. Do you understand?" "Yes, Don." He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "You made the right choice, Marco. Sofia is the kindest of my daughters, the gentlest. She will be a good wife to you." "And if I hadn't chosen her?" I asked. He looked back at me, his expression cold. "Then you would already be dead." He left. I stood alone in the study, my hands shaking, my mind numb. What had I just done? I had chosen Sofia to save my own life, but what kind of life had I condemned us both to? 3 days. In 3 days, I would marry a woman I barely knew. I would become part of the Famiglia Castellano in a way I never imagined. I would be bound to this house, this family, this prison, and somewhere in the shadows, Valentina was planning her revenge. The next 3 days passed in a blur. I was confined to my room, meals brought to me by silent servants. I saw no one except Moretti, who came twice to measure me for a suit and to inform me of the wedding arrangements. On the 3rd day, the stern woman came to my room with a black suit, perfectly tailored, and a white rose for my lapel. "It is time," she said. I dressed slowly, my hands trembling as I buttoned the shirt, adjusted the tie, slipped on the jacket. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The wedding was held in the mansion's chapel, a small stone room with stained glass windows and rows of wooden pews. The only guests were the Don, his 3 other daughters, Moretti, and a handful of trusted members of the family. I stood at the altar, a priest in black robes beside me, and waited. The doors opened. Sofia walked in, dressed in a white gown that made her look like an angel. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of white roses and her eyes were locked on mine. She looked terrified. She walked down the aisle slowly, her father at her side. When they reached the altar, the Don placed her hand in mine. His grip was firm, his eyes boring into me. "Take care of her," he said quietly, "or I will kill you myself." "I will," I said. He stepped back, and the ceremony began. The priest spoke in Latin, words I didn't understand. Sofia and I repeated the vows he gave us, our voices barely above a whisper, and then, finally, he pronounced us husband and wife. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said. I looked at Sofia. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling, a small, fragile smile. I leaned in and kissed her gently, and in that moment, I knew the truth. I had made my choice. Now, I would have to live with it. The reception was held in the dining hall, the same room where I had first met the sisters. The table was covered with food and wine, candles burning in silver candelabras. The Don sat at the head of the table, Sofia and I to his right. Isabella sat stiffly, barely touching her food. Julia watched us with quiet curiosity. And Valentina. Valentina drank heavily, her eyes never leaving me, a dangerous smile on her lips. Halfway through the meal, she stood and raised her glass. "A toast," she said, her voice loud and sharp. "To my dear sister Sofia and her new husband Marco. May your marriage be everything you dreamed of." She drained her glass and slammed it on the table. "And may you both remember that dreams don't last forever." She walked out of the room, leaving a heavy silence behind her. The Don said nothing. Later that night, Sophia and I were escorted to a new room, a bedroom, our bedroom. The door closed behind us and we stood there facing each other, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us. "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. "I'm sorry you had to choose. I'm sorry this is your life now." "It's not your fault," I said. "It is." She looked down at her hands. "I asked you to meet me in the library. I brought you into this. And now you're trapped." I walked over to her and took her hands in mine. "We're both trapped, Sophia. But maybe we can figure out a way to survive this together." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think we can?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm going to try." She nodded and rested her head against my chest, her body trembling. And as I held her, as the candles flickered and the shadows danced on the walls, I realized something. I had entered this house as a soldier, invisible, expendable, but I was leaving it as something else, a husband, a son-in-law, a pawn in a game I still didn't fully understand. And somewhere in the dark corners of this mansion, Valentina was watching, waiting, because the war for me wasn't over. It had only just begun. But for tonight I held Sophia in my arms and let myself believe just for a moment that we might find a way to be happy, even in a prison made of marble and shadows, even in the house of the Don.